to the section of tonight's program where we will be having speeches. So I would like to call upon, from the Emma and James Hope lineage, can I please call upon Jim Allison and Sue Morris to come forward.
Thank you, Renee. Can people down at the Hope End hear? We hope they can. Please forgive a level of unpreparedness. But I'm delighted to have this opportunity. Now, I must say, I'd like no one to leave the room because at the end of our talk, we are going to do a little bit of historic medical research, and you're all needed. Now, Emma Stone married James Hope from Scotland. This morning, I wrote a story, a mixture of fact and conjecture. Don't shout out if you hear a mistake. Chances are no one else will care. You can tell me quietly afterwards. But my story is about James Hope and how I believe he came to meet Emma. He arrived in 1932 specifically to act as tutor to a family's children near Campbelltown. During or after that time, I believe he went down to Hobart. Having found out about Thomas Stone's school, he thought of furthering his contacts, networking in the education field. Invited to Thomas Stone's home for dinner, he noticed a beautiful young girl there and made a note of her. He went back and completed the work that he was doing and moved to Ross. Ross was a part of Tasmania that was very fertile. It was an area that was being thought of for the future. And it's interesting that, I'll just find the name here, I've made some notes. There was a Reverend Horton who travelled into the Ross area, and he believed that there was a future there, and he invited his brother, who was a sea captain, who worked in the South China Sea, and said, come here. And his brother came, and one of the first things he did was to apply for a grant of land around Ross. Also at that time, Governor Arthur and others following him were looking into the education needs of the young men and women of the settlement. And I believe it was probably in around the 1940s that Horton College was devised and planned. Now, Horton College, which opened in 1955, was a prestigious college in the colony. And 1855, beg your pardon. And many of the students from that college became lawyers, doctors, and other esteemed learned professions. Now, it's likely that James Hope, being in the education field himself, would have heard of these plans and situated himself in Ross so that when Horton College was opened, he would be on hand. Now, although the college opened in 1855, I do have it written correctly. It was in 1936, following up on his dinner at the Stones' home. Following up on his dinner at the Stones' home, that he proposed to Emma, and they were married. And it's interesting that the same year that they married was the year that Thomas and Anne resigned from the orphan school and moved out into the country. Interesting timing. Now, Emma had 13 children, which is why there's so few of us here. Doesn't quite compute, does it? Now, Ross Bridge, which is just outside Ross, is the third oldest bridge in Australia. Was the third that's still in use. It was built by convicts and was completed in 1936, just about the time that 1836, just about the time that James Hope went to Ross. And James Hope, obviously, I would say he had a wife now, a family was starting, he was waiting for Horton College to come, and in the meantime he he did actually quite a lot of property dealings, but amongst those dealings was hotels, and one was actually known as Hope's Hotel. Now, of those 13 children, Agnes Kerr was the first. 1865, Emma Christina, and in 1856, the year that Anne Stone died, Anne Hope was born. Their daughter they named Anne. So it's interesting, that timing. I had hoped to tell about some of the Hopes I've met over the years. One particularly, when I first came here in the late 1980s, I met Paul Hope. Paul, his grandfather was born before my grandfather, so our families were close, and my parents were with me, and we went and met Paul and his wife Pat in their home. Paul received the Order of Australia for his work in recording the Australian battalions who served in Papua New Guinea during the war. Last year, one of their daughters, Rebecca, lost her fight against cancer in Melbourne. She had worked in the Premier's department here, and I'm told that 3 former premiers came to her funeral. Now, before I get that 9-minute bell, my sister has a couple of things to say.
Thank you, Jim. It's amazing where you find relatives, you know. Our grandfather, Claude Hope, left his small family when my mother was 6. So we never really connected with the Hopes. So I do a few crafty things in the textile line, a little bit of felting and knitting, and you name it, I've done it. And one day I was travelling to Brisbane to go to the Spinners and Weavers group, and the name Hope came up, and the person sitting next to me said, "Oh, that was my maiden name." I said, "That was my mother's maiden name. I wonder if we were related." "Oh, we couldn't be," she said. "We come from Tasmania." I said, "My mother came from Tasmania." And we found out that our great-grandfathers were brothers. Mine, John Thomas, and hers, Cornelius. Now, Margaret and I have been exhibiting our artwork together for years. We were friends for years before we knew we were related. There you go. Now, that medical thing. I have crooked little fingers. And I want to know if anybody else has crooked little fingers. So if it comes from the stone side, that means it's not from the Hopes. I have 2 of them. And see me later.
Thank you, Jim and Sue. Now from the Anne and John Rose lineage, I would like to call upon Glenn Lyon. Thank you.
Testing. Errol was kind enough to ask if we'd like to say a few words about Anne. I'll keep this fairly brief. It's going to be focused on Anne and 1 layer or 2 layers down, and that's about it. We won't have too much colour and movement, but some interesting details, and these are courtesy of my beautiful wife Louise, who's the family historian and who's helped Errol out with a few things in the preparation for their weekend. So thank you, Louise. Anne Stone was my 3 times great-grandmother. She was born 1822. Sorry, this is Anne Stone, as in Thomas and Anne Stone's daughter. Was born 1822, died 1889. Anne married John Rose in Wellington, New Zealand in 1847, and they had 7 children together. They didn't stay in one place too long, as reflected by the birthplaces of their children. And my wife says this is a hint for you historians out there. The first 2 were born in Tasmania, so they were married in New Zealand but had their first 2 in Tasmania. The next one was named Oceana because, according to the family, she was born at sea on Bass Strait in 1852. The next 3 were born in Victoria around Bendigo, so we've jumped to another location, and their last child was born in New Zealand. There's a bit of a picture going here. 3 of their children, Anne, John and Charles, all died young, to be followed closely by Anne's husband, John Rose, who died in 1868. He died in New Zealand of cholera, aged 51. Anne then returned to Victoria and died in Eddington in 1889, aged 66. I'll come back to the Eddington thing because it has an interesting twist for me. Anne and John Rose's daughter, Oceana Ellen Rose, had 14 children with Henry Barker, Lyon. That's where the Lyons start. Oceana, pardon me, I keep getting this wrong. Oceana is my 2 times great-grandmother, and she is Kerry O'Leary, Kerry being the other Stone relative on that yellow line. Oceana is Kerry's great-grandmother, so there's a generation gap between us, and I'll explain a little bit. I descend from Oceana's son John Barker Lyon, their firstborn. Kerry descends from their daughter Ellen Rose Lyon, who was their 9th born. So that explains the age gap. That's really as much as I'm going to say about the Roses. It's clear that the Alfred Stone, the White clan here, has been doing family history and family reunions for a considerable period of time. Hats off to you. I must admit, last weekend we were at a family reunion for my wife's family in Victoria, so this is a family reunion holiday. You've been having these family reunions for a number of years, and this special reunion has provided an opportunity for some of the, I suppose, colours who haven't been quite so closely aligned to actually mix with a lot of family that we didn't know we had, a lot of family that we're finding we have some other connections to, and it's been a fantastic experience. So I'd like to thank the organisers for providing a platform for hopefully some stronger ties and binds between us all going forward. Talking about the overlaps and interconnections, the Stones and the Lyon families were both in Lenakuri at the same time and intermarried. So not only do we have Stones, I've got some the Lyon and Stone both matching up through Lenakuri and then heading off to WA. The other, I suppose, thing I would mention, at the unveiling of the plaque yesterday, I was talking with Judith Bowden, who'd come across from Bothwell, and fascinating conversation with Judith. On my mother's side, my father's my connection to the Stones, but on my mother's side, James Foster came out in 1824 and brought the first 5-ship cattle out and became the Angus herd in Australia. And Judith Bowden was able to point out where the farms were, who the people were, and a whole pile of connections. So it's quite amazing that she was able to connect a lot of the other dots. So not only do the Stones and the Lyons match up, I've also got the Fosters. We knew about some of them. We're coming back to photograph them because we've been here 5 years ago and did a number of the sites that we've seen over the reunion. But can I say on behalf of Anne Stone of the second daughter's lineage, a big thank you to everyone who's helped organise tonight. It's a fantastic event, very well run and very much appreciated. So thank you everyone.
Thank you, Glenn. Can I just check if people in the corner can hear? Yes? Okay, thank you, great. So can I please now call on on Clive Edward Stone from the lineage of Thomas and Annie Stone. Thank you.
Bit of a short call here, but don't worry about it. Normally if I go to a meeting I usually make a few notes, but I didn't have time to do that, so we'll just call on what we can think of. I think this is a very, very well presented occasion. You know, like the people who organise it need a medal. But one thing I'd like to say, is that I think 50 years is too long, because we've got a lot of young grandkids and that here now. They're going to be 60 or so when the next one comes around. They can contribute a lot more if they start a bit earlier. You know, and like even like yourself there, and Fiona and all the others that are your age now, you know, you put another 50 years on it, and you know, the younger ones should be doing it, you know. So, you know, like I had a choice to come to this one, this weekend, or All Souls School in Northern Queensland, annual reunion. I went to one last year at All Souls. I hadn't been back to the school for 58 years. But after I did and met a lot of people, I said I'll be coming back every year from now on, and which I will do. So, you know, you look at 50 years, it's a long time. And I think you can do a lot better if you, it's open to suggestions what you do, 5 years, 10 years, every third year or something, and it doesn't have to be at the same time every year, but the one at Charters Towers this year coincided exactly this weekend for All Souls and the Stone one. But I just, they said to me, they said, look Clive, you've got to go down to that 200-year one, you should never miss that. And ironically, the one next year is the 100-year one for All Souls School, so it's worked out pretty good. That's just something I think everyone in here should sort of put a bit of thought towards, how often you want to do it in future. But hopefully something will come out of it, and it won't be 50 years, you know. And, you know, like those young kids that are here today, they're going to be your future, aren't they? They might be running around and having a bit of fun now, but you put 10 years on it, you know, and they'll be teenagers, and well, they're nearly teenagers now, some. So, you know, it's a great thing, you know. I'm very glad that I came, you know, very glad. And Errol, you've done a magic job of all that bookwork, mate, and doing those profiles up and all that, you know. I've just never seen anything like it before in my life. We live in the bush up in the Northern Territory, and we don't go to town much, and we probably live very much like our ancestors did, and we don't worry too much about, you know, all the good things in life. We just go to work every day, which they would have done too here. And I don't think you can take it out of the body, like those people that started all this off here. You've only got to drive around Hobart and see all the old stone buildings and all the rock that's come out of the ground and turned into buildings. They were hard workers, and they would have to work every day. But anyway, I'll tell you a little story. My dad came up when I was running the new station at Argyle after they built the dam on the old station, the Ord River Dam. And we were in the meat house one night at 9:30, and we're putting the meat away and the stock camp, and you know, we done our day's work, then got a killer when it turned dark, you know, and not because we stole it, it was our meat. But my dad, he was up there, and he was quite ancient by then, you know, and he would have been probably about nearly 80. And, well, 75 it was, so 77 he was, yeah. Anyway, I heard him talking to the blokes after I was telling them what we're going to do tomorrow, you know. It was up at 9 Saturday night, and I said, we'll be up bright and early, and we'll be into this and into that, and he heard him. And he said, he heard me, and he said, does he work you on Sunday too? And, oh yeah, we work every day here. And, well, geez, he couldn't get over it, my dad. But then when I came down to Briarvale and stayed there with old Betty for a few nights, me and the family, we saw the little churches around the district, you know, and then you could understand. And I seen a couple of old photos about the old fellow when they were young. They all, you know, the little farmhouses and that. But that's how they lived their life. they'd go to church on Sunday and, you know, probably had the day off, I suppose. But we just used to work, and the only way I could get good work out of the blokes was, you know, you go 6 or 8 weeks and then take them into town and let them get on the Turks for a while. And we've got, when I went to Rosewood, we were there for 18 years, you know, must start running that place for Hawker Corporation and then the Sarawak Economic Development Corporation. But I had a lot of good young white fellows, you know, that come there, and I had a black fellow that used to run a black camp too. And anyway, they're all good men, and there were a lot of them now, you know, like probably, I don't know, it'd be 60 or 80 of them, I suppose, over 18 years. And you often have a bit of a yarn to them on Facebook here and there, but now they're talking about they want to do a reunion for the people that worked at Rosewood, and I said, where are you going to have it? And they said, oh, we'll have it at Timber Creek. So, you know, that's going to come up in the next year or two, all the young fellas, and there's a lot of good young fellas that worked for me on the station and in the course of just being stockmen or head stockmen or horse breakers or fencers or boremen, you know, or work with contractors. I had one contractor there for 7 years because just building fences and yards, because the Sarawak mob put a lot of money into that place and they're reaping the benefits now. But I had one young fella that we took from Charters Towers. His old father lived in Charters Towers, and he said, get this boy over there, Clive. And so we took him over to Rosewood, and the first day, I think it was Paul. Were you the bloke when he was walking off with his swag the next morning? Hey? Oh, Goose. Yeah, anyway, the next morning he thought things were a bit tough there, so the next morning he's walking down past the yard with his swag on his shoulder, and he's pulling out after one day. And anyway, I'm sure it was Paul, but it couldn't have been. It might have been old Harpoon, a big pommy bloke from England. Anyway, big long one, that's why we called him Harpoon. Anyway, he said, you can't keep going down there, Goose, because we nicknamed him Goose. That came Harpoon nicknamed me Goose because we had a few turkeys there, and he said, look at them bloody goose walking around here, you know. He said, there's only one goose around here. He said, that's you. Anyway, so Goose eventually stayed for a few years, and he was always whinging about working and that, but he still put in, you know. He started to get a bit mongrel, getting out of bed in the morning. And I said to him, Goose, if you don't... If you don't get out of the bed in the morning, Goose, I'm going to come down there, we're going to tie you in the bloody bed with rope, and we're going to flog you with a stirrup lever. Anyway, so he started getting out of bed on time then, and about 2 years later or 3 years later, I happened to go into his room in the men's quarters, and he was, you know, he'd been to town the day before, and he had a big mob of comics and all that, and I happened to just look behind the door, and I seen on the back of his door, here I lie, a bag of bones, worked to death by Clivey Stone.
Thank you, Clive. I would now like to call upon Jeff Stone from the lineage of Alfred and Sophia Stone to give a toast to absent relatives.
Thank you, Renee. Like with the others, I'd like to congratulate Errol on the excellent job that he's done, the work, the months, years that he has put in, and all the others that have helped him. But Errol's certainly been the name that's come up front, and whether I stole someone else's thunder, I'm sorry if I have, but well done, Errol. Having said that, I was going to say ladies and gentlemen, but I should say cousins, because I guess that's what we all are. And it is wonderful to see so many of you here tonight. And I believe I think the figure was mentioned of the descendants have been something about 4,000. How many are still living? I asked that question and we weren't too sure. But there have been a lot of people who have sent their apologies because they couldn't come this weekend. Some of them have been sick, some have had to work, or some of it's too far. And we would like to remember all those people who couldn't get here and who would be here if they could. So I'd ask you if you'd all charge your glasses and be upstanding and propose a toast to our absent relatives.
Please be seated. Thank you, Jen. We will now have a 10-minute break, after which we will continue with 3 more speeches, followed by dessert. Thank you. Peter Stone from the lineage of Joseph and Margaret Stone to come forward, please. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I haven't had a lot of time to prepare anything, but I'll give it a go and we'll see where we end up. So I'm just going to speak on what I've been told from a young child about family history. So I'm sort of going to start from when we first asked questions as kids. Like, we were told that we went to the 150th reunion, which I was only a bit under 3. So I've seen photos, so I do know I was there, but I can't remember it. Yeah, so I have been there, but so this is the first one that I can remember. But the stories that we were told, which we've read in you know, publications and the Early Pioneer book and all the rest, was of Joseph and his brother Edward leaving here and going to the goldfields in California. And that was something that really interested me. And so he was only 23 at the time and his brother was younger, and they went to California on the gold in the 1849. And so they were part of the 49ers of the 49 gold rush in California. And I thought that was really, you know, something special to be, you know, think we had relatives that did that. And it wasn't long before they heard of the gold discovered in Victoria. So they got on a boat again and went to Sydney and bought horses, rode from Sydney down to Mount Alexander, just south of Bendigo, and then from there back into Bendigo, and you know, we're amongst the first 1,000 odd people in Bendigo, so very, very early on in the gold. But it wasn't long before they decided that they could make more money by feeding them than looking for the gold. So they moved out to Lockwood, just out of Bendigo, and they grew vegetables and things there for the miners. And then from there out to Lanakuri on the property that was called the Delta in 1858. And while they were on the goldfields, their other brother Alfred came across to meet them, and William became sick, and he came back over here with Joseph, and subsequently he died over here. And then when Joseph returned to Victoria to meet up with his brothers back at the Delta at Lanakuri, ground was being opened up for selection in Woodstock, in which Alfred and Joseph selected ground. So Joseph's property was called Alva, and Alfred's was Woodlands. And so that was in 1865, and that story is something that always interested me and made me want to learn more about our family history. So, hence I've done a little bit of looking and reading and things like that. And the thing that makes it even more interesting is that the property Alva that Joseph Stone selected is the place where I actually live. And so I farmed that with my brother Steve, who's down the end there. And we now also lease Woodlands, which was Alfred's property. So we run both those properties. So we have a fairly strong connection to not just the Stones, but to the properties and the area. And so it's, always interested us. And the other thing that I found was interesting too was that the Stones have always had a connection with teaching and farming. And when they were in Lanakuri, they worked together and helped get the Lanakuri Primary School started. And it was a relative that came and was the first teacher there. And the three Stone brothers, from what I understand, were on the school committee and helped get that organised. When they moved to Woodstock, they started the church there. It was called the Bible Christian Church, which is still standing on the corner, just up the road from where I live. And it's got 1869 on the front of it, so that's when it was built. And so that Bible Christian Church still stands there today, which they helped get going. And shortly after that, they wanted to get a primary school going there in Woodstock West. And we found some letters at one time in the archives, I think it was, that were written to the Education Department from Joseph Stone to the Education Department, saying that he would like to harvest his crop of wheat on that corner of his block before they put the primary school there. And I think from memory that was around 1871. I could be wrong, but somewhere there. So they've always had an interest in farming and in education, and it's something that has always sparked our interest. So we've always looked at those sorts of things with great interest. So Joseph's son, Richard, which is my great-grandfather, he bought a property down it's 5 miles from there. It's called Laverock. He bought that in 1890. So he farmed there. Then after his mother died, which was Margaret Stone, Margaret Foster, he moved back to Alva, lived in a house that Thomas Alford had built, while they pulled down the second house that was on the property, which was a single brick house. So there had been a slab house established first. So they pulled down the single brick house, and then they built a double brick house, which is still there today, and that was in 1919. So that's just come 100 years since they did that. And subsequently, my grandfather then lived on Alva as well. When he got married, he moved to Laverock, where my father was born, and then he moved back to Alva, which is where I was born, and that's where I currently live. So yes, that's sort of what got me interested in family history, and yeah, I think that's where I'll leave it.
I would now like to call upon Bruce Stone from Edward and Christina Stone's lineage, please.
Richard.
Apologies, Richard.
Sorry, Richard.
Thank you.
This is the man.
Okay, I was getting worried with all the emails, etc., and the profiles. It's obvious that the family's been very heavily involved in education, in farming, in associations with the church, and sport, but not the performing arts, which is a particular area of mine of interest, until Clive came along. And I think he could start a touring one-man show for I'd like to change tack. I could go on forever about discovering my family, but I'd like to point to the fact that there are three major events happening this weekend. The first, of course, is this wonderful reunion, thanks to Errol and all the organisers. Other two developments that I've only recently become aware of. One was the web page. I just did not know it existed until reference started being made to it in the emails from Errol, etc. Wonderful. Great to have a web page, and it's so authoritative and clear and easy to use. The other thing is, I found out today, is a new book on the history of Thomas and Anne by Alex Stone. I hope it's going to be distributed here tomorrow. We will find out. But he announced it at the lunchtime talk. And it takes me back to 1969 and the reunion in that year, the 150th, of which I was very heavily involved. We held it at Landakuri, and then some of us came down here to Hobart, and the plaque was unveiled in the church at Newtown that you'll see tomorrow. 1969 was 50 years ago, and family history research was very different, wasn't it? A lot of people here, I'm sure, were battling away with early microfilm and microfiche, readers that broke down. Newspapers were starting to be churned out in back sets on microfilm. The Family History Society movement was young. You couldn't get much assistance and much help from fellow people, fellow researchers. But thanks to Alex Stone for both the website and the book, obviously he's had a huge experience, long experience in research. You look at what's happening today, the internet dominates, Trove exists. When I think of the indexing of newspapers, I'm a librarian by profession, National Library in Canberra for those of you who've used it. And I was aware of all the developments as they happened. I wasn't involved in most of them, but newspapers dominate. Newspapers on microfilm was sort of great advance back in the 70s. Now we have total indexing of digitised newspapers online. Very powerful tool. One question which has been raised here, and with me personally over the last 2 days, is what about the future? Well, I think we've got the future in the form of the internet, as well as inspiration that comes from those that practice research. And let's use the internet for video games, to get the really younger generation in, right through to publication. know our resources. We need to exchange more, and that's why I've been pleased to hear the discussion on a more frequent reunion. Need not be quite the grand size that this is, which is very impressive, but more communication on a personal level is very important, and that could happen with more frequent reunions. And that's about it, I think. That's the scrappy notes that I've got here. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I would now like to call upon my father, Errol Stone, from the Alfred and Sophia Stone lineage.
Cousins, a very warm welcome to each one of you. And I'm so thankful for the privilege, thankful to the Lord, and thankful to many who have helped put this weekend together. But firstly, from the Alfred family, yes, look, it is a good representation. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half tables here. And we've had some more at 7 over here, 7 and a half. And many of us were born within 60 to 100 kilometre radius from the central wheat belt. And so we were all farmers from that area. Alfred, we are from Alfred and Sophia, and they had 10 children. Went across to, we got married in Bendigo and lived at Lockwood. And Grandpa died at 89 years of age and at Woodstock. So we have all those names. We have many farm names. We have Lanakuri still. Many of you at Lanakuri, and Jeff is the one, Jeff who farms Lanakuri, and he was Thomas yesterday, and Anne was Anne yesterday, and she is 21 years of age tomorrow, and my wife is 21 years of age tomorrow. And so the farm names we would like to bring forward. Lots of sentient articles mentioning farm names and educators. And I asked Alex if we could split it. Alex has done an incredible job. You know, it's a big lot of work. You know, and sometimes I would be up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning because putting this together, it was rare to get a sleep beyond 4 hours. It was very rare. And until I got here, and last night I think I slept for a considerable period of time because yesterday was the scary one. Yesterday with vehicles coming down that hill, it was paramedic background, it was not good. It was not, but we all got through, and we had paid people stopping vehicles coming down. So Alfred and Sophia had a friend of mine mention about the family after reading some of these articles, and said that Thomas and Anne were a fecund people. Now, I had to go to the dictionary, and fecund means, you know, a procreating people, and yes, we give thanks for such an anniversary as this. I hadn't spoken to Clive or any of you about how frequent this should be. I said to my wife and my daughter, my wife this afternoon, my daughter tonight, don't say anything, but I'm going to suggest that the next one not be too far in the distant future. Because we've got lots of young ones, and the future is theirs. You know, we don't mind being at the next ones, but it's good that these younger ones coming through are able to do the organising. So whether it be 10, whether it be 20 years, it doesn't really matter. But it is good that we continue on. These 50 years ago, a number of you were there. Some were there and could not remember because of being so young. But Thomas and Alfred, the Alfred and Sophia, we give thanks for each of these, for each of the families who are here representing this lineage. Now, for those, you probably haven't seen who the committee are. Okay, I'm going to ask some of you to stand.
Alexander can't stand because he is in absentia. So thank you to Alexander in absentia. Sometimes I would send through, well, you could see what time the emails all went through. And some were 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And when I would send them to him, he would be sending back to me. And so he put in an enormous effort. And thanks to him for what he has done with the website. The website will continue. I asked him if it's possible to keep it going into the future and how we keep it going into the future, because tonight is about keeping this going into the future. You know, it's not speaking just about everything in the past, but how we can keep it going with these young ones in the future, that we can still respectfully remember the past. And just remember that 200 years ago, one night, last night, Thomas and Anne arrived, and those who went on the bus tour, and we give thanks for the bus tour. And I don't know, for those of you who went on the bus tour, whether you actually saw what was in the background of your program. And if you looked at it closely, the background of your program, it was actually the David Shaw. The David Shaw boat's on there. So I don't know whether anybody recognised that. Anybody pick that up? Anyway, that's what the background was, because my granddaughter put that together. And so we give thanks for the bus tours. I give thanks to Kira. Now, Kira is in absentia tonight. She is on her way to Japan. She was the leader of the first group this morning, and they went to the airport, and she's on her way to Japan. And so in absentia, I give thanks for Kira. Now, Jim Allison, please stand up. Jim Allison, James. I spoke to James some 18 months ago because Rick mentioned that he organised a Hope reunion in Tasmania and in Hobart. And Jim has been an incredible, constructive comment person. You see, we don't criticise, and as a family, we should not criticise. We should be constructive in our comments. Jim was constructive in his comments. It was a privilege to work with this man, and I only met him yesterday. And he has, please don't sit down. And so then I got to know Rick. Rick Sims, please stand up, Rick. Another man who, and Nick, yep. Both these three men, some of you probably can't see, here we go, there we go. These three men, I had never met until just the other day. We walk in, I said, I know I'd recognise you by your photo. So these three men have been a great assistance, as has the two Fionas, the two Fiona knee stones. Please, Fiona Holmes, knee stone, has been an incredible proofreader. And sometimes she said, Harold, you send it through in the early hours of the morning and you want it before the sun rises. Thank you, Fiona, for your hard effort in putting in there. Fiona McDonald. Fiona McDonald, Timber Creek. I got to know these folks really, really well. And when they walked in, I was able to say, Fiona, welcome to you. Olivia, you frequent flyer, you were just across here the other day. And that is Olivia. And young Wyatt, and then young Angus. And so, Fiona, don't you sit down, please. Then got to know of Fiona's father, Clive. I mean, couldn't you imagine sitting down at a campfire with Clive? What a classic. These folks have an interesting character, and one of the things, you have farming, you have education, and one thing is horse skills as well. And obviously Thomas and Anne were very good with horse skills, and it goes right through the family. I mean, the man's on 1 million acres, you know, and he's got so many thousand cattle, and it's amazing. Please don't sit down. Our treasurer, Michaela. Please stand, Michaela, and Clive has always... She is not fierce. But, folks, if you have the opportunity to either donate to the cause, or if you haven't had the opportunity to to pay for something that maybe you were involved with during the weekend. I hope your conscience gets you. No, sorry. Please do remember our treasurer. Please do remember. Okay, quickly, we have a BSB. Please don't sit down. And look, there's been many others. Jeff and Suzanne and Del have all been proofreaders as well. Louise Lyon, please stand up. I never knew Louise, but she has been a great help. Here she is. My wife said, "Which one's Louise?" Robbie, that's Louise just there. And I've never met these folks. I knew Fiona. I met her at a funeral earlier on in the year. But these other folks, working with them has been an absolute pleasure. I just had never met them, but as Richard said, communication these days is amazing. And so I give thanks to, please don't sit down yet, also to Robbie, my wife. They're going to ring it in a minute. Robbie, my wife, please stand. 45 plus years of marriage, an incredible lady. And to my family as well. I won't get them all to stand, but thank you, and folks, you can be seated now, but thank you to you all. Greg Kay, thank you. We called out for somebody from a camera, and he came forward. Ben came forward, and Ben said, Errol, can I help you anyway? And I said, yes, if you could be our IT man. He forgot his computer. But do you know what he did? I set up a hotspot for him a while ago and earlier on today, and I pulled out my grandson's computer, and he set up a website. The website is up there now, and we will give you the address, the link to it, just in these days ahead. The first photos there already, and this is specifically for photos and videos, two separate sections, photos and videos from this weekend. You'll get the link and you can put in whatever you want. But thank you to Greg, who came forward, and thank you to our IT man. So lots were involved in this. Now, tomorrow morning, buses leave at 9 o'clock just outside the Grand Chancellor. 9 o'clock in the morning, please just hop on the buses that you hopped on the other day. If there's any extras, we'll find some way of getting you there, but please hop on, fill the buses up, and because parking up there is a little tough, and it could cost you $80 contribution towards the society here. If you get fined for parking in the wrong place. And then we have permission to go through the cemetery as you did today. This was booked 18 months ago. The Lady Nelson was booked 18 months ago, and it was just working on theory of averages. And so here we are. We had to bring in some extra tables, but that's okay. So tomorrow, 9 o'clock, and then we go to the succulent. And the succulent, we said, okay, and they said, you can have 80. And I said, okay, we've got 120. I said, okay, we've got 150. And they said, well, we can't do it. I said, you can. I'll show you how you can. And so, folks, these were meant to be given out to you tomorrow. But you're standing tomorrow. You can't be seated. Our elderly folks can be seated. Those who need seats can. This was meant to be given out tomorrow. But it just happened that it came out today because we've got so many there tomorrow at the succulent, but it's a privilege. Everything was overbooked. The Lady Nelson today was overbooked. I'm just glad they couldn't count properly. It's been a wonderful time. Thank you all so much. And just remember, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Then we go to the church service. We couldn't just have our own. We wanted to have our own, but we will be with the folks that are there. And times we mentioned on the bus to you. And we go up to the Hopes. And Jim, if you can give us a little bit of a rundown up at the Hopes gravesite tomorrow. So Emma, remember, was the first one. She was the first one born. Anne was 5 months pregnant when they arrived, and so that's where we're going tomorrow. Then Jim suggested the succulent restaurant, beautiful restaurant. But what we'd like there, it's when you come in, we all have to have our lanyards. Please wear your lanyards tomorrow, because otherwise it makes it very difficult. The organisers want to see your lanyards, and we don't have to remember everybody's names. Then when you come in there, you may just have to get some hamburgers. They're having it set up on the balcony, so we go out to the balcony to to get our buffet and we can go back inside. If we're overcrowded, please be gracious. Just wander out for a little while, then come back in. But when we have a photo after, we'll try and get one where we're all downstairs, if possible, and the photo being taken from upstairs looking down. We'll see how it goes, but we need to have a photo tomorrow, and I hope that, Greg, have you been around to all the tables just to get folks on tables?
Not quite.
And or
Not the
individual
new
photos
ones.
on tables, so we can remember this, because this is momentous. It's an incredible situation for us to be in, and thank you all for your assistance and for those who have helped. So many helped, and the family have been an enormous help throughout these last 18 months, and it's been a privilege putting these articles together. Thank you for allowing the material to be put out, because we all learn much more about others, and sometimes, you know, when we put down our the request, you know, what is your date of birth and your address and that type of thing, it's not for invasion of privacy. It was so we could work out our auntie was 95 years of age and Ethan was 4 years of age, and so we could try and get some things into perspective. Thank you all very much, and may tomorrow be a fruitful time as well. Renee Louise will announce, and we give thanks for Renee Louise, our educated daughter from Singapore, flying in the other day. But many of you who we've got to know over the last 18 months, thank you for all of your assistance and support. The people from the Lady Nelson today said they have never seen people in such a group as this all arrive on time to hop on the boat. People on the bus yesterday said, we've never had people stop vehicles. You notice they waited till I got in front of them because I'm very familiar with the area, and I said don't take this lightly, bus drivers. You know, this is no joke. I know you're going down here, and thank you. They wouldn't go down to the house, but we had people block off either side. They said, we've never seen that before. And the people, I think you've all been a very good testimony, and thank you all for your support and encouragement throughout this. Thank you. Brilliant.
Thank you, Dad. I would like to call upon Jim Allison to say a few words. Thank you.
Well, before we raise the roof, giving our thanks to this man here, I'd just like to say a few things. We've just had a demonstration of the way he thanks people, and it's so heartwarming. There are other things that I have learned over the past 12 months that I've been in communication and before meeting Errol. I've understood that it's over 3 years ago, or already 3 years ago, that he started to think and plan this occasion. But the thing that I have learned over the past 12 months is a number of things. One, the tremendous amount of hard work that he's put in preparing all of the things he's distributed to us. I've learnt the care that he's put into people, the inspiration that he's given us, and I'd like to mention one particularly because I've got 3 granddaughters, and this inspired me so much that it's going to inspire them. Do you remember, Errol, the update you sent through of Ross and Natasha Stone when they talked about farms across borders, when from Western Australia to New South Wales, Ross organised 20 trucks and 1,000 bales of hay for farmers in drought. And Amelia, who was 13 or 14, is Amelia here?
No, Auntie is.
Okay. Well, Amelia is the one who's going to inspire my young granddaughters because they're about her age. And I just make that as one example of the many updates and the many inspiring things that have been sent through, and the thought and care, Errol, that you have put into those to make those available to people. And it gives you pride in the Stone. I mean, I almost went to tears with some of the things I read and the pride I felt in being part of the Stone family. that we are. The other thing that moved me so much was yesterday at the church, and the thoughtful way that you presented that opportunity for us to give our thoughts and prayers to Thomas and Anne and their son William, who were there. And the way you presented it so that we understood the size and scope of the Stone family. Well, Errol, I hardly know you, and yet there are all these things I do know about you that make me so proud to know you, and others will know far more. But I'd like you now to all join me and give a rousing cheer for Errol for all he's done.
Thank you, Jim. I won't ask Dad to say any more words. You've done an amazing job, Dad. Thank you. So now it's time for dessert. So please help yourself to the dessert. Thank you.
Okay,